Charles Fairview was standing in the sunlit foyer of his Connecticut estate when a flicker of movement through the tall French doors caught his eye. Past the clipped hedges and the white stone fountain on the immaculate green of the west garden, something was wrong. He set down his leather briefcase, leaning forward, trying to make sense of the scene beyond the glass. Maya Williams was on her knees. He blinked, thinking at first she must be pulling weeds or fixing the edge of a flower bed, but then his stomach turned cold. Her hands were trembling. She was clutching at blades of grass, stuffing them into her mouth, chewing desperately like someone who had run out of choices. The house went silent around him. The ticking of the grandfather clock faded. Even the soft hum of the air conditioning seemed to stop. Charles felt his chest tighten. He pushed open the door and stepped onto the stone patio. "Maya?" His voice cracked despite himself. She startled. A blade of grass clung to her lip before she brushed it away with the back of her hand. Her eyes, usually calm, focused, were wide and wet, filled with panic. She started to stand but swayed slightly. "What are you doing?" Charles asked. He was closer now, the gravel crunching under his shoes. "Talk to me. Are you sick?" "No, sir," she whispered. "I just saw you eating grass." Maya's gaze flicked toward the kitchen wing of the house, as if something there might leap out and punish her. "Please," she said, almost inaudible. "Please don't say anything." Charles frowned. "Not say anything? Maya, who told you you couldn't eat?" Before she could answer, the glass door slid open behind him. Elaine Fairview, Charles's wife, stepped out barefoot onto the patio, her silk robe glinting in the late morning sunday. She held a porcelain coffee cup in one hand. Her lips painted a sharp red that matched her tone. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Charles, why are you out here with her?" He didn't turn. "I just found Maya on her knees eating grass." Elaine's nose wrinkled in disgust, not at the horror of it, but at the sight of Maya herself. "I told her from the beginning," she said coolly. "Our kitchen is for family. We don't have people like her in there." "People like her?" Charles finally turned. Elaine sipped her coffee slowly. "Look at her. That skin, that smell. She's not to be near our food. Standards are standards." "W." Charles felt heat rise to his face. "Standards? She's starving. You banned her from the kitchen because she's black?" "I banned her because this is my house and I will not have dirty hands touching what we eat." Before we continue, if you find this story interesting, make sure to subscribe. It really encourages us to keep bringing you more, Elaine snapped. "If she wants to feed herself, she can bring her own bread like the rest of the help. We pay them well enough." Maya's hands clenched her apron. She didn't look up. Charles turned back to her, his voice softer now. "Is this true? You're not allowed to eat here?" Maya's throat worked. "If I step into the kitchen again, she said she'd throw me out," she whispered. "I send every dollar home. My son's in Atlanta, sick. If I lose this job—" Her voice broke. "He won't survive." Charles stood still, the wind stirring his blazer. The words hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal, harder than any market crash. In his own home, under his own name, a woman had been forced to chew grass to keep a child alive hundreds of miles away. He looked at Elaine. "Did you know about her son?" "I don't ask about private affairs," Elaine replied. "It complicates discipline." Something in Charles snapped. He stepped toward Maya, then dropped to one knee in front of her. Elaine's breath caught in her throat. Maya gasped, unsure what to do. Charles looked up at Maya, his voice low and unsteady. "Forgive me, not just for this moment, for everything I let happen, in my house, in my name." Maya's lips parted, but she couldn't speak. "It ends today," he said. "Do you hear me? This will never happen again." A gust of wind moved through the garden, stirring the lavender and sending a few petals drifting across the grass. For a moment, the three of them stood frozen, an heiress of cruelty, a man of means, and a woman made to kneel by hunger. Only now, it was the billionaire who knelt, and in Maya's chest, somewhere beneath the shame and exhaustion, a faint, unfamiliar feeling flickered. Not yet forgiveness, not yet trust, but the smallest spark of hope. Maya didn't sleep that night. Long after the sun dipped behind the trees and the house lights dimmed, she sat curled on the edge of her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, knees pulled to her chest. The room was cold, not from the weather but from something else, something older than winter, the kind of cold that sank into bone, into memory. Outside her window, the garden lay still, moonlight casting silver streaks across the lawn. She could still taste the earth on her tongue. Earlier that day, she'd watched Charles Fairview, a man of inherited power and quiet wealth, kneel in the grass before her. He hadn't looked embarrassed. He had looked ashamed. No one had ever done that for her. But shame wasn't a solution, and rich men's words had a history of evaporating when the world came knocking. Down the hallway, the house creaked with its usual nighttime rhythms. Pipes groaned. The distant hum of the central air purred through the vents. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent, and then a soft knock. Maya stood, heart thudding, and cracked open her door. Charles Fairview stood there, alone, in a gray sweater and slacks, hair still damp from a shower. He held a small brown paper bag in one hand. "I didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't." He looked over his shoulder, as if making sure they were alone. "May I come in?" Maya stepped aside. The room barely had space for two. A twin bed, a tiny dresser, no photos, no color. He handed her the bag. "It's just soup, from my own kitchen." She held the bag like it might bite her. "Your wife said." "I don't care what she said." Maya looked at him. "You should." "No," he said, firm now. "I shouldn't." He paused. "She doesn't speak for this house anymore." Maya set the bag on the dresser, untouched. "I'm not trying to earn your forgiveness," Charles said. "I just want you to know I'm not going to pretend yesterday didn't happen, and I don't expect you to pretend either." Her arms folded across her chest. "It's not about pretending, it's about surviving." He nodded slowly. "Can I ask you something?" She hesitated. "Yes. Why didn't you tell anyone? About your son? About anything?" Maya's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. "Because poor people don't get to explain. Not without being accused of excuses. And black women. We're expected to be strong, silent, and invisible. I've learned that silence keeps roofs over heads. If you feel that Maya is truly a heartbreaking character, give her a like. And don't forget to comment where you're watching this video from. Who knows? Someone right near you might be watching it too." Charles said nothing for a long moment. Then, softly, "I'm sorry you ever had to learn that." She looked at him. "Apologies don't feed children. Neither does silence," he said. Maya blinked. For a second, it seemed like she might say something more, but she turned away. "Thank you for the soup." He left without another word. The next morning, the house felt different. Charles summoned the household staff, groundskeepers, housemaids, kitchen crew, drivers to the East Lounge. It was a room usually reserved for cocktail hours and charity brunches, not staff meetings. Elaine was notably absent. Maya stood near the back, arms crossed, trying to read the room. Some looked curious. Others, nervous. A few looked like they wanted to bolt. Charles stood in front of the fireplace, his posture unguarded. "I want to be clear," he began. "I was unaware of the rules that have been enforced in this house. I accept responsibility for not knowing, but I will not allow them to continue." A murmur rippled through the staff. "From this moment forward," he said, "every staff member will be granted access to the kitchen during designated hours. No one will be denied food or rest. If you work here, you eat here. Period." No one moved. "And if you've ever been punished, spoken down to, or made to feel less than human, my door is open to all of you. I want to hear your stories. I can't fix what I ignore." One of the gardeners, an older man named Raphael, raised a hand. "Sir, are you sure this is allowed, Mrs. Fairview?" Charles raised his voice. "Mrs. Fairview no longer sets policy in this house." The silence was thunderous. Maya's eyes flicked toward the others. Some looked relieved, some skeptical, but something had shifted. A current of possibility. Later that afternoon, Charles visited the family attorney. He began the process of transferring household authority back into his name: finances, management, staffing. Elaine had held that power for years, inherited it through marriage, wielded it like a club, but not anymore. When he returned home, Elaine was waiting in the living room. She was seated on the leather settee, legs crossed, fingers wrapped around a crystal tumbler of scotch. "You're making a fool of yourself," she said without looking at him. "No," he replied. "I'm just seeing clearly for the first time in years." She stood. "They'll take advantage of you, Charles. That's what they do. You show weakness, and they'll eat you alive." He looked at her calmly. "No, they'll finally eat. That's the difference." That night, Maya sat by the window again. This time, the air didn't feel quite so cold. The garden still shimmered beneath the moonlight, but it no longer looked like a place of shame. She didn't trust him yet, not fully. But in a world where silence had been her only defense, a voice speaking on her behalf was a sound she hadn't known she needed. And it was only the beginning. Maya woke before dawn, as she always did. The house was still asleep, the hallways empty, the air heavy with the smell of polish and old wood. She padded across the small room barefoot, pulling the curtain aside. Out in the west garden, the dew lay like glass beads on the grass, the same grass she had chewed just 2 days before. Her stomach tightened at the memory. She'd been in service long enough to know words could be dangerous. A maid who complained lost her job. A black maid who complained was marked as trouble, no matter how careful she was. And trouble didn't pay for medicine in Atlanta. Trouble didn't keep a sick boy alive, so she had swallowed her hunger with the same discipline she'd used to swallow her anger. Until Charles had walked out of those doors and seen her. Downstairs, the kitchen hummed with a different energy now. The cook, Mrs. Keating, had laid out oatmeal, toast, and a large pot of coffee. The staff drifted in, hesitant, casting glances at the doorway as if expecting Elaine Fairview to sweep in and reverse everything. She didn't. For the first time since Maya had arrived, someone handed her a plate. "You might as well eat," Mrs. Keating said softly. "It's going to be a long day." Ugh. Maya sat at the end of the staff table, spoon trembling slightly in her hand. She took a small bite, then another. She'd forgotten the taste of warm food eaten without fear. Around her, the staff murmured quietly. Some were grateful, some skeptical. The shift in the house was so new it felt like borrowed air. Upstairs, Charles stood in his study staring at a row of family photographs. He could still see the look on Maya's face in the garden defiance and shame braided together. He thought about the way she had shielded herself even while starving. She hadn't begged him for anything. She'd simply endured. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his corporate office. Another investor breakfast. Another media query about his wife's absence from a charity gala. He set it aside. For the first time in his life, the noise of business felt small. At 10 o'clock he called for Maya. She came to his study quietly, in her pressed uniform, eyes wary. She stopped at the threshold, not crossing it without permission. "You wanted to see me, sir? Come in, please, sit." She remained standing. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Maya, I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me? About the kitchen, about your son, about everything." She took a breath, still holding herself upright. "Because people like me don't get to explain, Mr. Fairview. We get to be silent, or we get to be gone. That's the choice." Charles leaned forward. "You really believed I wouldn't listen?" Her eyes met his for a second. "Sir, it's not about belief. It's about history." She gestured slightly at her dark skin. "If you're still here and enjoying the story, we'd love your support. Take a second to hit subscribe. It really means a lot. When someone like me makes trouble in a house like this, it's never the lady of the house who pays. It's the maid." He swallowed hard. "I learned that when I was 12, she continued. "In Savannah, my aunt cleaned houses. A man accused her of stealing a watch that turned up later in his own drawer. She lost her job, and nobody apologized. That's the kind of lesson you don't forget." Charles sat back. "And you've been carrying that lesson ever since. I don't have the luxury not to." He was silent for a long moment. Outside the window, a sparrow hopped along the balcony rail, then flew away. "Tell me about your son," he said finally. Her hands clenched. "His name is Elijah. He's 8. He was born with a heart defect. The surgery is expensive. The medication," she trailed off. "I send everything home. Every dollar. I live on coffee and bread. Sometimes not even that." Charles stared at the papers on his desk, seeing them without seeing. "Does he know?" "No. I tell him I'm eating fine. I tell him I'm strong." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "It's a mother's job, isn't it?" Charles rose from his chair and crossed to the window. He had built his reputation on solving complex problems, on spotting flaws before they collapsed a deal. Yet in his own home, a woman had been starving under his roof and he hadn't noticed. "I can pay for his surgery," he said quietly. Maya's head snapped up. "No." He turned. "No? I'm not a charity case," she said, voice steady. "I'm a worker. I take a wage. I earn my keep. If you want to help me, treat me like a person, not a project." He held her gaze. "Then stay. Not as a maid, as house manager. Equal pay. Real benefits. You'd oversee the staff. No more silent suffering." She hesitated. "And your wife?" "I'll handle Elaine," he said. Maya looked away. Her instincts told her to refuse. But the thought of another day chewing grass, another night wondering if Elijah's heart would fail before she could save him, it made her throat tighten. "I'll think about it," she murmured. "That's all I ask," Charles said. Later that day, Maya walked through the house in a kind of daze. The walls she had scrubbed, the floors she had polished, they looked different now, like a stage set. In the kitchen, staff members whispered about changes. In the hallway, someone had pinned a small sign near the staff entrance. Meal times: 7, 9 a.m., 12, 2 p.m., 6, 8 p.m. It was written in Charles's handwriting. When Elaine swept past her on the stairs, Maya lowered her eyes. Elaine's perfume left a trail of cold citrus behind her. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Elaine murmured under her breath. "He'll tire of playing savior soon enough." Maya said nothing. She had learned long ago that some words weren't meant to be caught, only to drift away. That evening, she sat by her window again, soup steaming in a chipped bowl on her lap. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the sharp claw of hunger twisting inside her. She thought about Elijah, about his small hand in hers when she'd said goodbye the last time. She didn't trust Charles yet, but maybe, just maybe, there was a crack in the wall big enough to let in a little light. Outside, the garden glimmered in the moonlight. The grass looked almost silver, and though she would never forget what she'd been forced to do there, she told herself quietly, "This is not where my story ends." The following morning, the sun rose over the Fairview estate like it always had, slow, golden, cutting across the dewy lawn and waking the crows in the oaks. But inside the house, nothing felt ordinary. The walls, once pristine and silent, now echoed with something new, uncertainty. Maya walked the corridor near the dining hall with measured steps. Her uniform was crisp, her posture straight, but her thoughts tangled like a storm gathering at the edges of calm. She had spent the night replaying Charles's offer over and over, weighing it like gold in a pan. House manager, equal pay, respect. It sounded like a dream, but dreams, in her experience, had a habit of turning sharp. She passed the grand staircase and saw Charles at the base of it, flipping through his planner. He glanced up and gave a small nod, not a command. A gesture of acknowledgement. That alone told her things were shifting. But upstairs, Elaine was plotting. In the master bedroom, Elaine Fairview sat at her vanity, brushing her sleek blonde hair in long, methodical strokes. Her reflection stared back with icy precision. She wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by the help. Her husband's sudden change of heart felt like betrayal. She didn't fear Maya Williams, she loathed her. That girl had walked in with her cheap shoes and quiet ways and upended everything. Elaine had spent years constructing an empire of etiquette, silence, and boundaries. And now a maid was being elevated, empowered? Not in her house. Elaine picked up her phone and dialed. "Yes. Harold, we need to discuss the estate's staffing contract. And I need an audit on discretionary expenses, specifically in payroll." "Yes. Right away." Downstairs, Charles met Maya near the study. He gestured toward the doors. "You have a minute?" She nodded, following him inside. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Charles closed the door behind them. "I spoke to my legal advisor," he said, cutting straight to it. "The household accounts are in my control now. Elaine's access has been frozen. Any changes in staffing, pay, or structure, those decisions fall to me." Maya crossed her arms. "So it's official." "Yes," he said. "And if you accept the position, I want your voice at the table, scheduling, budget, everything." She was quiet for a long time. "And what happens when your wife decides I'm too much of a disruption?" His mouth tightened. She already has, but I'm not backing down. Maya studied him. You don't know what it's like to be seen as expendable. No, he admitted. But I'm learning what it's like to be ashamed. He handed her a small envelope. This is the first paycheck at the new rate. Think of it as a beginning. She opened the envelope slowly. It wasn't charity. It was payment for her value for once. I'll take the position, she said. A flicker of something crossed Charles's face. Relief. Respect. That afternoon, Maya took her place in the kitchen, not at the sink or broom closet, but beside Mrs. Keating, reviewing schedules and supply lists. Her presence sparked more than curiosity. Some of the staff whispered. One of the younger maids, Selena, gave her a thumbs up behind a cupboard door. But not everyone welcomed the change. Near the loading dock, Bernard the groundskeeper pulled her aside. You think they'll let this last? He asked. You're the first one in 20 years to get promoted above maid without a scandal or a resignation. Elaine's not going to sit quiet. I know, Maya said. But this house is changing, one way or another. Meanwhile, Elaine made her first move. She hosted a private luncheon on the patio for several of the estate's longtime donors and society wives' friends, who still whispered with velvet malice behind manicured hands. The champagne flowed freely, so did the gossip. Elaine painted herself as a victim, a husband overtaken by guilt, a maid manipulating sympathy. She used phrases like disruptive energy, boundary overstep, and most carefully, cultural differences. Her guests nodded solemnly, but a few, to her quiet horror, asked questions she hadn't expected. Is it true she was starving? One woman whispered. And your husband knelt to her? Asked another. Elaine forced a laugh. Oh, you know Charles, always the dramatic one. But something in the room had shifted. Even among her allies, the optics were changing. Pity didn't sit well on billionaires, not in today's climate. Back inside, Charles sat alone in the study, staring at the fire. He hadn't told Maya yet, but he'd already arranged a specialist consult for Elijah. No strings attached, just access. He hadn't built his fortune to hoard it, not anymore. Maya, for her part, began cleaning out the old supply room near the back staircase. It would become her new office. She moved carefully, tossing out moldy binders, cleaning shelves that hadn't been dusted in years. Near the back of the shelf, she found a torn page tucked between books, an old roster of past employees. Most names were crossed out. One line caught her eye. D. Robbins, terminated, May 2006, conflict with Mrs. Fairview. She stared at the name, her fingers tightening around the brittle paper. She remembered hearing whispers in her first month, a maid, who had talked back and vanished overnight. The house had always kept its secrets, but not anymore. That night, Maya stood in the kitchen window, sipping tea made with real sugar, not packets from the staff lounge. Her body was still tired, her heart still cautious, but in the silence of the night, she let herself feel the beginning of dignity. A storm was coming. Elaine would not yield quietly, but Maya was no longer the woman who chewed grass to survive. She was standing now, fully, and she wasn't alone. The morning after the garden luncheon, Elaine Fairview stood at the top of the stairs, arms folded across her silk robe, eyes narrowed in disdain. Below her, Maya moved across the foyer with quiet confidence, clipboard in hand, delegating tasks to the cleaning staff. She was no longer in a maid's apron. She now wore a simple, crisp blouse and slacks, with a gold name tag pinned to her chest, Maya Williams, house manager. Elaine gripped the banister. The sight of that woman, her skin, her presence, her authority moving freely through Elaine's home, ignited a cold fury. It wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. A line had been crossed, one that Elaine had spent decades guarding, and now, Charles had allowed the help to believe they belonged. She descended the staircase slowly, each step as deliberate as a judge entering a courtroom. Maya glanced up and gave a polite nod. Good morning, Mrs. Fairview. Elaine didn't respond. Instead, she circled her like a cat, sharp heels clicking across the polished floor. I see Charles is still playing savior. That's always been his weakness. He confuses guilt for growth. Maya didn't flinch. Your husband gave me an opportunity. I intend to earn every inch of it. Elaine smirked. Oh, darling. You think this is about work? This is about territory, and you're trespassing." Maya lowered her clipboard. "With all due respect, this house is no longer your battlefield." Elaine's voice dropped. "Everything in this house is mine. Every wall, every tile, including the rules. And you? You're a guest with a ticking clock." Maya straightened her shoulders. "I'm here to work, not argue." Elaine leaned in slightly. "Then do yourself a favor and remember your place before you forget what you had to eat to stay here." Maya's eyes didn't waver. "What I ate then says more about this house than it ever did about me." And with that, she walked away, clipboard tucked to her chest like a shield. Later that day, in the West Wing sitting room, Charles received a call from his estate attorney. His face grew still as he listened, nodding once before hanging up. He summoned Maya. "There's been a complication," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Elaine's challenging the restructuring." "Legally?" Maya raised an eyebrow. "Can she do that?" "She's arguing that the household operates under a separate marital trust one she manages. She's claiming I overstepped by reassigning staff positions without her consent." Maya's jaw tightened. "So this wasn't just about control, it's about ownership." Charles nodded. "She's trying to trigger a clause that could remove me from full control of the estate if I'm found to have mismanaged assets." Maya blinked. "I'm the asset, aren't I?" His silence was answer enough. She rose. "Then it's time I stop being silent." The next day, Maya walked into the staff lounge with a small legal pad. The other employees quieted as she stood before them. "I need to ask something of you," she said, "but only if you're willing." She explained what Elaine was doing, how she planned to use technicalities and legal webs to erase the changes Charles had made and Maya along with them. "If any of you have experienced mistreatment," Maya said, "verbal abuse, denied food, pay threats, anything, you have the right to speak." "Isidig." A murmur ran through the room. Raphael, the gardener, raised a hand. "You think anyone will believe us?" "I think they'll have to," Maya said. "If enough of us speak, if enough of us stand." Selina, the young maid, stood. "Mrs. Fairview once slapped my hand away from a tray and told me, 'Your hands don't belong near porcelain.' I still have the scar." Raphael added, "She docked my pay once for tracking dirt on the marble. I was repairing her irrigation pipe." More voices followed. Maya wrote down every word. By sunset, Charles and Maya sat in the study, with a growing stack of statements from the staff. Charles reviewed them in silence, face pale. "This house," he muttered. "It's worse than I knew." Maya placed her hand gently on the folder. "It's not just this house. It's a system. But the difference is, you're choosing to see it now." Charles looked up. "We'll take this to arbitration. I'll have the attorneys draw up statements. Bring in an independent investigator." Good," Maya said, "but I want to testify too, in my own name." He hesitated. "You don't have to." "I do," she interrupted, "because this is bigger than food, bigger than Elijah, bigger than me. People need to hear it. And I'm done hiding behind closed doors." 2 days later, in a quiet legal chamber in Stamford, Maya took the stand. Elaine sat across the room, lips tight, dressed in pearls and a pale blue jacket. She never looked at Maya. Not once. But Maya's voice was steady. She told the panel about being banned from the kitchen, about skipping meals to send money home. She described eating grass because she couldn't risk her job, couldn't bear to fail her son. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. When the staff statements were read aloud, Elaine's composure cracked just once when Selina's story was confirmed by an old medical record. Her expression grew tight, jaw clenched. Still, she said nothing. When it was over, the panel adjourned to deliberate. Maya stepped outside into the crisp afternoon air. She didn't feel triumphant, but she felt lighter. Charles joined her. "Whatever they decide," she said quietly, "I'm proud of what we did." He nodded. "So am I." They stood in silence, side by side, no longer Billionaire and Maid, just two people trying to rebuild a house where no one had to be silent to be safe. The sky over Stamford was gray and thick with low-hanging clouds when the verdict was delivered. Inside the legal chamber, the panel of arbitrators returned to their seats with solemn faces. The room was quiet. No jury. No cameras. Just old wood, clean suits, and tension that sat like stone in the center of the room. Charles Fairview sat straight-backed, his hands folded calmly in his lap. Maya, seated beside him, held herself with